Hello. So I got to thinking. Hold on, let me minimize this thing so I'm not looking at myself the whole time. So I got to thinking that well, it's not that I got to thinking. The problem was that I think I got to thinking too much, and ultimately, when it came down to me having to write and type and put all these thoughts and stories all on computer, it was a little more than I'm used to. I guess it's easier, obviously, for me to speak than it is for me to write because it just comes out more quickly. And I think what happens is my mind gets just so filled with all these thoughts and ideas about life and about myself and about the world and about where I'm going and what I'm doing that it's just it's easier to just speak it out loud. And ultimately, my desire in creating this blog was um, to establish more intimacy, to establish more of a relationship with my family and my friends, with you guys, with you all. And so I figure, what a better step in that direction than to just be me and to speak, what's been going on with my life. So here I am, trying something new, something different, and obviously, if you guys know me well enough, you know that one, I don't like to hear the sound of my voice or the thought of me, verbally speaking on something that's recording me that others are going to listen to. I mean, that just isn't. And then combine that with the fact that I don't like to be filmed. Yeah, so if anything, it's working on a number of different things. One, my relationship with others and developing that, and two, working on humility. So here I am, being me, and yeah. So first of all, it's been great since I've been here. It has been amazing. I learned a lot just in the last few weeks about myself, about my life. It's amazing what when you take the time to really listen to yourself, listen to your body and your thoughts and your spirit and everything that's going on you and around you during times of transition. Because it seems like during those times when you're going through transition, it's when things are most difficult, when things are most challenging. It's usually during those times when you really need to buckle down, schedule and lay out a plan, have structure, discipline, all of those things that me on a regular day, absolutely struggle with. So this has been good because I really kind of came into this transition knowing this and understanding this, and this is kind of something that has kind of been evolving in my life. Over the last little while, couple of years, where I've been trying to really work on those times when I know it's going to be difficult, like times of transition. And so I try to prepare myself ahead of time. And try to be more prayerful, try to be more focused, put structure in my life, have priorities that I really need to work on during those times, particularly, just my faith. And that was the primary thing when I first got out here, or actually before I got out here, was just praying about and really hoping and desiring for a time or a place where I can go to and be around like-minded people, be around people who love the Lord and desire that kind of closeness and intimacy with Him, and being able to have that kind of community, because community, without a doubt, particularly when it comes to Christian community, is essential in my life. I need it. If I don't have God in my life on a regular basis, I fail miserably. And so that was a big priority for me. And actually, before I got here, I started emailing a couple people, actually one person. I emailed this woman who was in charge of one of the women's groups here and family groups, and because there was nobody else on that website, so I was like, you know what, she can probably direct me. And sure enough, she was able to get me plugged in on a couple things and fill me in on the community here, which she had told me was vibrant, and I got here, and sure enough, things are going really well. And I went to Bible study this past weekend with a group, and had dinner at their family's home. Yesterday, I had lunch with one of the chaplains who's in the area. He called me up and asked me out to lunch, and then all these different things. In fact, my first weekend here, when I went to Nuremberg, I went to Nuremberg just to kind of get out and to explore, and it was my first time, taking the Eurail or the train and just getting out. And of course, I hadn't studied a word of German or anything. I just figured, you know what, I'm gonna go out and do it because that's the kind of person I am. I love adventures and something new. So, yeah, sure enough, I went out, and I got there. And it was amazing, and it was beautiful, and it was just so much fun to walk around and explore and to try these new things. But it was really, really interesting, and it was really fascinating because as I was walking, there was this kind of a gloom, but it was very temporary. It was this kind of, I looked around, and I realized that I'm in this completely foreign country, this completely foreign land. Not a word of English spoken anywhere near me, so I can't understand anything that anybody's going on. And it was just in that moment, it was almost like I just felt so small and so alone because there was nothing familiar to me in that place. And but at the same time, there was something kind of strangely exciting about that. Here's this foreign land, this foreign place, and it's new to me, and I'm exploring, and there's always this. I just knew that there was something to be found, and I was kind of offering this up to God, and I was just like, you know what, Lord, there's this kind of this this dichotomy going on here between the unfamiliarity, but with this excitement of joy all at the same time. And I kid you not, after praying this time and just walking, maybe, it must have been 10 minutes time. I was walking down the street, and this girl at the corner handed me this little piece of paper. And I look at it, and I look at her, and of course she's trying to speak to me in German. And I'm like, I do no German. I don't speak German. Or whatever. I don't know why I'm speaking with an Italian accent, but so I'm like, what is this? And she's like, oh, and she actually started speaking in English. She goes, it's a verse in the Bible. And I was like, oh, and I look at it, and sure enough, Jeremiah so and so, and it was just interesting. We started talking, and she started telling about her church and what's been going on. And in fact, that particular weekend, all the churches in that city of Nuremberg had all gotten together, at least the majority of them had all gotten together and decided to do this weekend kind of evangelization, which was really amazing because it was at that point that I began to realize and see, just about every corner, people praising and worshiping, handing out flyers and tracts and literally, speaking and preaching on the corner. And it was just amazing. It was beautiful. And it was almost like, it was exactly like God showing me that in the midst of a completely different country, in the midst of a whole different world, He is there. And there is, and having met this person, that lives, thousands of miles away from my home, we are able to share in something that is universal, something that has been, inscribed in our hearts, and that being, God Himself. And it was amazing. It was great. And we had a great conversation. And in fact, she invited me out to church the next morning. She came and picked me up, and I met with her and some other friends, and we all went out and had lunch. And it was just a great, great day. And it was such an answer to prayer. It was exactly what I had been hoping for and asking for. And if you guys are listening to this, and Vicky or Josue, thank you. You guys have been amazing. You guys were amazing. And it was just so much fun to hang out and to get to know you guys and all that good stuff. But anyways, so yeah, it was so good. It was such an answer to prayer. And I just came home on a high, knowing that I was in the right place. I was doing the right thing. and God was at the center of it. And it's just kind of progressed like that. I when I got back, I went to they had this single soldiers lunch, that the chapel puts on, and or dinner, and I went there and met a couple people and got along with them really well, and got invited to this and got invited to that, and it's just been really, really great. It really, really has been. And at the same time, everything that's been going on here, like just a constant confirmation of me doing what I'm supposed to be doing. This past weekend, I got invited out to this Bible study that the church puts on, and I met a gentleman there, and he's deploying this. Actually, he just deployed probably today. Actually, so he was going to be deploying in a couple of days, and we just got to talking about life and the struggles with the military and war and family and all of these different things, and it was fascinating in how, when I told him that that my job, my MOS here in the Army is a behavioral health specialist, and he's like, I know what you do. He says, I've been there, in fact, he says, I still go there from time to time, to talk. He's like, there's a lot of things, that are going on in my life right now that, I need that kind of, that kind of assistance. And it was just a real eye-opener to me, because it was at that time that once he had learned, what it was that I'm here in the Army to do, that he started to open up a lot, and it was just beautiful to be in that place where I could see this human heart, wounded and struggling, and desiring, more than anything, just to talk to somebody and to try and gain clarity in their lives and what they're experiencing. And so he was asking me different things, and we just got to talking. And I've said this, if you know me well enough, and we've had this conversation before, because I think I've had this conversation with just about the majority of the closest people to me. One of the main reasons that I absolutely love this field of counseling and psychology so much is because of how human it is. We went through all these different classes while I was going through undergrad at Franciscan, and then taking these classes as well in the Army, and you learn all these different techniques on how to speak with people, and how to communicate with people, and body language, and your voice, and eye contact, and all of these different things, empathic responses, and it was fascinating to me, because when I'm reading this and I'm studying this, I'm thinking to myself, this isn't psychology, as people like to quote it. This is human nature. The reason these things are so effective is because this is what every and all human beings want. They want to be heard. They want to know that the person that they're speaking with is listening to them, and having, being their focus, and the desire to help, and to encourage, and to help empower and direct. These are all very natural, very human things, and so that's why I really love this field, is because I don't think of it as this scientific type thing. I think of it more as just a very human type thing, and so it fascinates me, to no end. It really, really does, because all I want is to just to get to know people, and to do my best to help them to understand who they are, and understand where they're going, and what they desire, and what they want. And if there's any way that I can help them to better understand, where they're going or who they are, where they are, all those things, just help them gain a little bit more clarity than that I've done my job. And yes, there is a science to it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's a way that people think, on a very, universal level. There are ways that we process thoughts, and there are ways that, there are ways that we do things, and so I want to know these things. I want to understand these things, and not, like I said, not for the sake of science per se, but just for the sake of just understanding people and doing the best that I can to help them to understand their situations better. So long story short, me and this gentleman, we spoke, and I just encouraged him, to really just make sure his faith, is primary when he goes, off to deployment. Because oftentimes, and I think this is without a doubt, the major difficulty with those who go on deployment and who are in the midst of war and all this deep darkness is the fact that when they come back and they are reintegrated into their families and into their friends and home lives, apart from the army, they have nothing to share. They have nothing to relate with, because their whole 9 months or year or however long that they're there for is very specific and very and unless you're there, it's very difficult to understand. And I say this, having never been there and not fully obviously understanding, what's going on. But I one of the things that I really encouraged him to do is the one thing that he and his wife can have and can share and can relate to one another, regardless of where they are or what they're enduring or how many miles they are apart, is their faith and what God's doing in their lives. And so I really encouraged him to kind of take note of what God's doing, so that when he comes back, he can share these things with his wife. And I encouraged him as well to talk to her about this, and maybe she can journal with him as well, so that when they do come back, and granted there are going to be things that they can't share, but there are going to be things that they can, and mainly their relationship with God and what he did in their lives while they were separated. And I just encourage them, to really think about it and to consider it, because I imagine that there are so many beautiful things that God is doing in both of their lives at the same time, even though they are apart. Because when you're married, when you have taken that step to become one in marriage, regardless of where you are in distance, in time, the Spirit moves in ways that is incredibly profound, incredibly mystic and mysterious, but powerful. And so, I just kind of encourage them to look at those things and consider those things and hope for this great possibility of being able to share with her what God did in his life and surrounding his soldiers, while he was deployed, and to hear as well and to rejoice in the things that God was doing in her life while she was separated, while she was, living apart. And so that's all kind of circles back to what I'm doing here. Thousands of miles away, sharing the beautiful and intimate things that God's doing in my life, in hopes that we can share and hear some of the things that God's doing in yours, and making God real, making God personal, making God intimate and real. This past weekend, we were going over in Mass. We were talking about, I don't remember what exactly we were talking about. Actually, I went to Mass and then I went to the Protestant church afterwards, and I think they were talking about relationships and marriage and got into the whole topic of this and that. But they were talking about God and how we view God and the name of God. And it really got me thinking about, I know this is kind of all going on and kind of, but it got me thinking about, who God is in my life. And this is something that, that God has been kind of challenging me over and over and over again for years and years. And I've done it to an extent, but what I'm getting at is, making God more, defining him more in my life. And what I mean by that is, when you read the scriptures, when you read the Old Testament, for example, specifically the Old Testament, God is not just just the God of all creation, which he is. But when you read about God to the Jews, he was the God of Israel. He was the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Jacob, the God of Elijah. He was a very personal God. And I like that. I like the fact that when they say that he is the God of Moses, it isn't because Moses wrote, all these things and people read about it. It's because God very specifically and very intimately worked and manifested himself in the life of Moses. And not only in his life, but in the lives of those around him. When they say the God of Moses, they mean the God who parted the seas. They mean the God who took millions of Jews in slavery out of Egypt and took them thousands of miles into the promised land. When you hear, the God of Abraham, you hear it. They all have very specific, very intimate meaning behind the name. And I feel like, in today's day, to a large degree, we've kind of lost sight of that personalness, personalness. And I ask myself, why is this? Why is God so impersonal now? And and it's funny because we talk as if we want to make God a more personal. Do you have a personal relationship with God? And this isn't anything new. It really isn't. And even though it's kind of established as something new, the whole idea of having a personal relationship with God is something that it's something that that they've been dealing with and living by years, thousands of years ago. And so there shouldn't be any reason why God can't be more real, more personal, more intimate with us today. And God has just kind of been challenging me with that. It's like, Rigo, I'm not just the God of Abraham and Moses. I'm the God of Rigo. I am the God of the Ochoa family. And not just because you can read it in scriptures and it says that, but because you can look at your life, you can look at your past, and you can see where I brought you from. You can see where I've shown myself and proven myself to you. You can see how I worked in your own individual life. I've worked in the lives of your families and your friends, and it's so true. It's so true. God, he's just done so much for me. And then he kind of challenged me again. He said, the only way that I am going to remain known and remain intimate to you is one, by sharing it. The more I share with others what's going on in my life, one, the more God is known. But two, the more I'm reminded of how personal and how intimate and how real God is to me. And so there's this kind of a mutual, dual thing going on here, where God is I'm glorifying God in expressing, to the world what He's done in my life. I'm giving Him all the praise and all the glory like He deserves. But I'm also, kind of reinforcing and building a stronger foundation of the intimacy of God and the personalness of God in my life by talking about Him, by expressing to others, who He is and what He's been doing in my life. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I just never either found a way to do it, or just the time. It's so difficult to spend time, this kind of quality time with somebody on a regular basis. And to be quite honest, when I love to pour into people, and I love to speak with people on a one-on-one basis. I'm not a man who's able to facilitate all these, these groups of people. This is me. I can speak to a crowd because it's one crowd, but as far as being intimate with individual, it's difficult. And so it's funny that doing what I'm doing right now actually seems very comfortable to me, and I'm actually excited about that, because now it seems like this is possibly something that I can continue to do. In fact, I'm probably not going to watch this right now before I post it, because if I do watch it, there's going to be a part of me obviously that's going to want to look at it and say, you know what, let's start all over again, and I don't want to do that. So I want to continue to do this. I want to try to continue to make God known to the world, to you guys, to my family, my friends, but make God more known to me as well. Solidify in my heart and in my mind and in my entire being, who God is and all these amazing things that He does in my life. Ask me, I can tell you stories after stories of what He's done, and some of you have heard these stories, just beautiful and amazing. Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, that's kind of what's been going on. I've gotten plugged in. I've met some great people, a great priest that does the mass and is here, and it's just, I'm so looking forward to getting started with my work and with my job. I'm still getting settled in there. We did a lot of moving this entire week, just kind of moving from one. We've been switching around, different offices and stuff to kind of get settled in, and so today is the last day that we've kind of been moving things around. So hopefully, this next week, I'll finally actually get started doing whatever it is that they need for me to do or want for me to do, because they haven't quite actually figured out specifically what my role is. We've discussed what I've been trained in, but as far as trying to define what it is that they want me to do, I guess that's been a little difficult. So apart from that, everything's great. Everything's great. My room is a mess right now, but everything's great. So yeah. So I hope that actually no, I knew this is not going to be the last one. This actually is a lot easier than I thought it would be, and so I'm actually kind of looking forward to starting these things, because to be quite honest, I've started to type, actually quite a few different little blogs, but I just, it's difficult to express, on words and in paper, what's going on up here. I think this actually might be a little bit easier to just kind of blurt it out. As far as the whole editing process goes, that's something, we'll work on as things go. I don't even want to think about that idea. But so we'll just kind of go, and just as it comes out, that's how it's going to come out. And so, and also comment, I mean, if I say something that is either wrong or whatever, and or you just want to say hi to me, I mean, feel free to little comment on the bottom, that would be cool. Because I would like this to be kind of not just a one-way thing, but a two-way thing. I'd love to hear what's going on with you guys and in the world, that God's working, with you. And so, anyways, I've rambled for far too long. So, let me pull this up here. And again, thank you for listening. And I hope things are well. I hope God's doing some great things in your lives. And know that I'm praying for you guys all. And just hoping the best for you. So God bless you. I love you all. And we'll talk soon. Take care.